There's a part of our brain, the amygdala, that is wired for survival. It's been with us since our ancestors roamed the earth, protecting us from predators. But today, we don't face tigers in the wild. We face something more subtle, but just as dangerous: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. And so our own minds become the enemy. They hold us back, not because they hate us, but because they are trying to protect us. The problem is growth lives on the other side of fear. Everything we want, success, fulfillment, impact, it's all beyond the comfort zone, but the mind, in its attempt to keep us safe, tells us to stay where it's familiar. It convinces us that risk is too dangerous. We often think our biggest obstacles are the external challenges life throws at us: financial struggles, unsupportive people, competition, or lack of opportunities. But the truth is, the greatest enemy we will ever face is not out there, it's within us. It's our own mind. Think about it. How many times have you wanted to start something new, whether it was a business, a project, or a fitness goal, only to hesitate because of self-doubt? That voice in your head whispers, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if people judge me? And so instead of moving forward, you freeze, not because of any real physical barrier, but because of the thoughts created by your own mind. Our minds have an incredible ability to shape our reality. If we believe we can do something, we find ways to make it happen. If we believe we can't, we find excuses and justifications for why it won't work. This is why two people with the same circumstances, resources, and opportunities can have completely different outcomes. One succeeds and the other stays stuck. The difference isn't their environment, it's how they think. The mind, if left unchecked, is the biggest source of limitation. It creates stories that aren't true, yet we believe them. A simple idea of failure turns into a full-blown fear that holds us back. A past mistake becomes a lifelong label of, I'm not good at this. A single rejection turns into, I'm not worthy. And the worst part, these thoughts are rarely challenged. But where do these self-sabotaging thoughts come from? The brain is wired for survival, not success. Its primary job is to keep us safe, not to push us toward greatness. That's why it avoids risk and discomfort. Thousands of years ago, this was essential for survival. Fear kept our ancestors alive. It warned them to avoid dangerous situations. But today, that same survival instinct is what stops us from speaking up in a meeting, from trying something new, from taking a leap of faith. The fear is no longer about life and death, but our brain doesn't know the difference. The mind plays tricks on us, making us believe that staying in our comfort zone is the best choice. But comfort doesn't lead to growth. Everything we want, success, fulfillment, confidence, exists outside of that comfort zone. The more we listen to the fearful thoughts, the more we reinforce them. Every time we avoid a challenge, we strengthen the belief that we aren't capable. And over time, that becomes our identity. The mind is so powerful that it can either work against us or for us. The good news is, just as we can train our bodies to be stronger, we can train our minds to be our allies instead of our enemies. We can start by becoming aware of our negative thoughts and questioning them. Is this fear real? Is this belief serving me? We can reframe self-doubt by shifting our internal dialogue. Instead of, I'm not good enough, we can tell ourselves, I am learning and improving. Instead of, what if I fail? We can ask, what if I succeed? Taking action is the most powerful way to silence the enemy within. The more we push past the mental resistance, the weaker it becomes. The mind may try to stop us, but we don't have to listen. We can choose to move forward anyway. At the end of the day, our greatest battle is not with the outside world, it's with our own thoughts. If we win that battle, nothing can stop us. Fear is one of the most powerful forces that shape human behavior. It dictates our choices, influences our actions, and often holds us back from reaching our full potential. But where does fear come from? Why does it have such a strong grip on our decisions? The answer lies deep within our biology. Our brain is wired for survival, not success. At the core of our fear response is a small but powerful part of the brain called the amygdala. This tiny almond-shaped structure has been part of human evolution for millions of years. Its primary job is to detect threats and trigger the fight, flight, or freeze response. Thousands of years ago, this was essential for survival. If a predator was nearby, the amygdala would send signals to the body to either run, fight, or stay completely still to avoid danger. This instinct kept our ancestors alive in a world filled with real, physical threats. But today, the dangers we face are different. We are no longer running from wild animals or fighting for our lives in the same way. Instead, we deal with psychological fears. Fear of failure, rejection, embarrassment, or uncertainty. The problem is, our brain doesn't know the difference between a life-threatening situation and a challenging or uncomfortable one. It reacts in the same way. When we consider stepping outside our comfort zone, the amygdala kicks in, telling us, this is dangerous, stay where it's safe. This is why so many people hesitate to take risks. Whether it's starting a new business, speaking in front of a crowd, or even asking someone for help, our brain interprets these moments as potential threats. The fear of judgment or failure triggers the same survival instincts that our ancestors relied on. As a result, we avoid these situations, convincing ourselves that it's better to stay in familiar territory. But here's where the real problem lies. Our mind mistakes discomfort for danger. It sees stepping into the unknown as a threat, even though it's often the path to growth. And the more we listen to this fear, the stronger it becomes. Every time we avoid a challenge, we reinforce the belief that it was unsafe. Over time, this turns into self-doubt, hesitation, and an unwillingness to take chances. The most successful people in the world are not fearless. They feel the same fear as everyone else. The difference is that they understand what fear really is, a natural response that doesn't have to control them. Instead of avoiding fear, they acknowledge it and move forward anyway. They recognize that fear is not a stop sign. It's simply a signal that they are stepping into unfamiliar territory. And that's exactly where growth happens. One of the most effective ways to weaken fear is to expose yourself to it. When we repeatedly face what scares us, our brain starts to realize that the fear is unfounded. Public speakers who were once terrified of crowds eventually feel comfortable on stage because they've trained their minds to see it as safe. Entrepreneurs who were once afraid of failure learn to see setbacks as lessons instead of threats. The more we challenge our fears, the less power they have over us. We can also reframe fear by shifting our perspective. Instead of thinking, what if I fail? We can ask, what if I succeed? Instead of viewing discomfort as a warning, we can see it as proof that we are growing. Fear will always be there, but it doesn't have to control our decisions. At the end of the day, fear is a natural part of being human. It's our brain's way of trying to protect us. But real protection is not about staying safe. It's about learning, adapting, and pushing beyond limitations. The brain may be wired for survival, but we have the power to rewire it for success. Success is not a matter of luck, talent, or even opportunity. It is, at its core, a matter of mindset. The most successful people in the world are not the ones who never face challenges or doubts. They are the ones who have learned to manage their mindset, refusing to let fear and self-doubt hold them back. They understand that their biggest obstacle is not external circumstances, but the internal battle they must win within their own minds. Think about the world's greatest athletes, entrepreneurs, and leaders. They all have moments of doubt. They all experience fear. The difference between those who rise to greatness and those who stay stuck is not that the successful ones never struggle. It's that they refuse to let their struggles define them. They don't allow fear to dictate their actions. Instead, they take control of their thoughts and use them to fuel progress rather than paralysis. One of the most powerful examples of this is Michael Jordan. Many people see him as a natural-born talent, but what truly set him apart was his mindset. He missed thousands of shots. He lost hundreds of games. He was even cut from his high school basketball team at one point. But instead of letting failure defeat him, he used it as motivation to improve. He didn't allow the voice of self-doubt to stop him. Instead, he trained harder, pushed further, and ultimately became one of the greatest athletes of all time. His success wasn't about being perfect. It was about his ability to control his mindset and keep moving forward despite setbacks. The same principle applies to business leaders like Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, and Steve Jobs. They all faced significant failures and rejections before achieving success. Musk was on the brink of bankruptcy with both Tesla and SpaceX before turning them into billion-dollar companies. Oprah was fired from her first job as a TV anchor. Jobs was kicked out of his own company before returning to revolutionize the tech industry. In every case, what set them apart was not just skill or intelligence, but their ability to overcome self-doubt and persist when most people would have given up. So how do successful people control their mindset? It starts with awareness. Most people don't even realize how much their own thoughts are holding them back. They listen to the voice in their head that says, "You're not good enough," without questioning it. But the most successful individuals recognize negative self-talk when it happens and they challenge it. Instead of accepting their fears as truth, they reframe their thoughts in a way that empowers them. They also take action despite their doubts. Fear and self-doubt thrive in hesitation. The longer we wait, the stronger our fears become. But when we take action, even in small steps, we weaken that fear. We prove to ourselves that we are capable. Successful people understand that confidence is not something you are born with, it's something you build by repeatedly stepping outside your comfort zone. Another key factor is how they interpret failure. Most people see failure as a reflection of their worth. They think, "I failed, so I must not be good enough." But successful people see failure as feedback. To them, failure is not the end, it's just information. It's a sign of where they need to improve, a stepping stone on the path to success. The biggest difference between those who succeed and those who don't is not external circumstances, but the ability to control their own minds. The battle is always internal. Those who win that battle go on to achieve greatness. Those who lose it remain stuck, not because they aren't capable, but because they allow their own doubts to stop them. The good news is, mindset is not something we are born with, it's something we can train. And once we learn to control it, there is no limit to what we can achieve. Negative self-talk is one of the most destructive forces in a person's life, yet most people don't even realize they are trapped by it. It operates in the background of our minds, shaping our beliefs, influencing our decisions, and ultimately determining the kind of life we live. Recognizing negative self-talk is the first and most important step in overcoming it. Without awareness, we are at its mercy. But once we start noticing the harmful thoughts that run through our minds, we gain the power to challenge and change them. Most of us have an internal dialogue that plays on repeat throughout the day. This voice in our head tells us stories about who we are, what we are capable of, and what we should or shouldn't do. Sometimes this voice is supportive and encouraging, but more often than not, it is critical, doubtful, and fear-driven. It tells us things like, "You're not smart enough for this," "You'll never succeed," "You're not good enough," or "Why even try?" These thoughts may seem small, but over time, they shape our self-perception and limit our potential. The problem is that we often accept these thoughts as truth. We assume that because they come from our own mind, they must be accurate. But this couldn't be further from reality. The mind is not an objective observer. It is conditioned by our past experiences, fears, and insecurities. Many of the negative beliefs we hold about ourselves are not facts. They are learned patterns of thinking that we have adopted over time. These patterns often start in childhood. Maybe a teacher told us we weren't good at math, and we carried that belief into adulthood. Maybe we were laughed at for making a mistake. So we learn to associate risk with humiliation. Over time, these experiences turn into unconscious scripts that play in our minds whenever we face a challenge. We don't even question them because they feel so deeply ingrained. But when we take a step back and examine them, we often realize that they are not based on truth. They are simply stories we have been telling ourselves. Recognizing negative self-talk requires mindfulness. We have to become conscious of our thoughts and start observing them instead of blindly believing them. One effective way to do this is through journaling. By writing down our thoughts, we can see patterns emerge. We start to notice the repetitive negative beliefs that keep showing up, and once we see them clearly, we can begin to challenge them. Another technique is to ask, would I say this to a friend? If someone you cared about was struggling, would you tell them you're a failure or you're not good enough? Of course not. You would encourage them, remind them of their strengths, and help them see the bigger picture. Yet, we talk to ourselves in ways we would never talk to others. Recognizing this double standard is key to breaking free from negative self-talk. Once we become aware of these harmful thoughts, we can start to replace them with more empowering ones. Instead of saying, I can't do this, instead of I'm not good enough, we can remind ourselves, I am growing and growth takes time. The goal is not to lie to ourselves, but to reframe our thinking in a way that supports progress rather than fear. Ultimately, our thoughts shape our reality. If we allow negative self-talk to run unchecked, it will hold us back from taking risks, pursuing our goals, and becoming the best version of ourselves. But once we recognize and challenge these thoughts, we take back control. We stop being prisoners of our minds and start becoming the architects of our own success. Fear and doubt are inevitable parts of life. No matter how skilled, experienced, or confident we become, we will always face moments where our minds try to convince us that we are not enough. That voice of self-doubt tells us, what if you fail? Or what if people judge you? For many, these thoughts are paralyzing. They stop people from taking action, from trying new things, and from reaching their full potential. But the truth is, the problem is not the fear itself. It's how we interpret it. The way we frame our thoughts determines whether fear holds us back or pushes us forward. Most people assume that fear is a sign to stop. They believe that if they feel uncertain or anxious, it means they aren't ready. But successful individuals understand that fear is not a stop sign. It's a signal that they are stepping into new territory. Instead of seeing fear as something negative, they reframe it as a sign of growth. When you shift your mindset from what if I fail to what if I succeed, everything changes. Reframing fear starts with understanding its purpose. The brain is designed to protect us from danger. Thousands of years ago, fear kept humans alive by preventing them from taking unnecessary risks like walking too close to a predator. But in today's world, the threats we face are mostly psychological. Fear of embarrassment, fear of failure, fear of rejection. The brain reacts to these situations the same way it would to a life-threatening event, even though the consequences are not life or death. Once we recognize that fear is just a biological reaction, we can start questioning whether it truly serves us in the moment. One of the most effective ways to reframe fear is to shift from a mindset of avoidance to one of curiosity. Instead of thinking, I hope I don't fail, we can ask, what can I learn from this experience? Instead of worrying, what if I mess up? We can shift to, how will this challenge help me grow? This simple shift changes fear from something that stops us into something that drives us forward. Doubt operates in a similar way. When we hear that voice in our head saying you're not good enough or you don't have what it takes, we can either accept it or challenge it. The problem is that most people never challenge their self-doubt. They assume that because the thought exists, it must be true. But the reality is, our minds are full of thoughts that are not based on truth. They are based on conditioning, past experiences, and limiting beliefs we have picked up over time. A powerful way to reframe doubt is to replace limiting beliefs with empowering ones. Instead of saying, I'm not good at this, say, I'm still learning and I'm improving every day. Instead of, I'll never succeed, say, every successful person started where I am. The only difference is that they didn't give up. The more we practice reframing our doubts, the weaker they become. Another way to weaken fear and doubt is through action. When we sit still and overthink, our fears grow stronger. But the moment we take action, no matter how small, we prove to ourselves that our fears are often exaggerated. Each step forward builds confidence and creates a new story in our minds. I can do this. At the end of the day, the thoughts we feed determine our reality. If we constantly focus on what could go wrong, we will feel stuck and overwhelmed. But if we train our minds to see possibilities instead of obstacles, we gain the courage to move forward. Fear and doubt will always be there, but they don't have to control us. We have the power to rewrite our story simply by changing the way we think. The mind is an incredibly powerful tool. It has the ability to create success or sabotage it, to push us forward or hold us back. The way we think determines the way we act, and ultimately the results we achieve in life. Most people, however, let their minds work against them rather than for them. They allow fear, doubt, and negative self-talk to dictate their choices, leading to hesitation, inaction, and regret. But the good news is that just as we can train our bodies to become stronger, we can also train our minds to become our greatest ally instead of our worst enemy. The first step in training the mind is awareness. Most of us are unaware of the constant dialogue happening in our heads. Our minds are filled with thousands of thoughts each day, many of which are self-defeating. We tell ourselves stories like, "I'm not good enough," "I'll never succeed," or "I don't have what it takes." These thoughts may seem harmless, but over time, they shape our identity and determine how we approach challenges. When we become aware of these negative patterns, we can begin to challenge and change them. One way to train the mind is by practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability to observe our thoughts without immediately reacting to them. Instead of blindly accepting every thought as truth, we can step back and question it. When a negative thought arises, we can ask ourselves, is this thought based on facts, or is it just fear talking? More often than not, our fears are exaggerated and irrational. By developing mindfulness, we can create a gap between thought and action, allowing us to respond with intention rather than react out of fear. Another powerful tool for training the mind is affirmations. The words we repeat to ourselves become our reality. If we constantly tell ourselves that we are not capable, we will behave as if that is true. But if we intentionally replace negative thoughts with positive affirmations, we begin to reprogram our minds for success. Statements like, "I am capable," "I am strong," and "I am constantly learning and improving" may seem simple, but they can have a profound effect on our mindset over time. The key is consistency. Affirmations must be repeated daily until they become deeply ingrained in our subconscious. In addition to affirmations, visualization is another powerful technique. The mind does not distinguish between reality and imagination, which means that when we visualize success, our brain begins to believe it is possible. Many elite athletes and performers use visualization to prepare for competition. They mentally rehearse their performance, seeing themselves succeeding in vivid detail. This mental practice strengthens their confidence and enhances their actual performance. We can apply the same principle in our own lives by visualizing ourselves overcoming obstacles, achieving our goals, and becoming the person we want to be. Taking action is also a crucial part of training the mind. Fear and self-doubt grow in the absence of action. The longer we hesitate, the more our minds convince us that we are not ready. But the moment we take even a small step forward, we prove to ourselves that we are capable. Each action builds confidence and weakens fear. Over time, the mind learns that challenges are not as intimidating as they once seemed, and taking risks becomes easier. Lastly, surrounding ourselves with positive influences plays a significant role in shaping our mindset. The people we interact with daily can either reinforce our fears or encourage our growth. If we constantly engage with negativity, we will absorb it. But if we surround ourselves with people who uplift, challenge, and inspire us, we will naturally adopt a more empowering mindset. Seeking out mentors, engaging with inspiring content, and fostering a supportive environment are all ways to train the mind for success. Ultimately, training the mind is not a one-time event, it is a lifelong practice. Just as we exercise our bodies to stay healthy, we must exercise our minds to stay strong. The mind can be our greatest enemy, but with consistent effort, we can transform it into our greatest asset. The choice is ours.